Hello and welcome to End of Life Conversations. In this conversation, we speak with Dr. Marianne Matzo, a longtime researcher and educator whose work has explored gerontology, palliative care, nursing, assisted dying, and the ways we prepare for death. Dr. Matzo shares how an early connection with older adults led her toward gerontology and eventually toward deeper questions about death and dying. Her research also examined the experiences of nurses involved intentionally ending a patient's life, raising difficult questions about assisted dying, nursing ethics, patient suffering, and the responsibilities of caregivers.
Yeah, it goes way back to well before people were talking about a lot of this thing. So we also talked to her about the often overlooked human and human side, basically, of palliative and end-of-life care, the importance of listening, which we talk about a lot, compassion, communication, and really just being present with someone who is dying. Together, we asked why we tend to wait until people are seriously ill before teaching them how to talk to you about death. That's what we want to do every day.
That's right.
Uh,
Help you
so
along.
this is for nurses, caregivers, death care professionals, educators, writers, artists, pretty much anyone who's ever wondered how we can become better prepared for one of life's most difficult and universal experiences.
That's right.
So yeah, as usual, the central question isn't simply how we die; it's how we care for one another while we're dying and while we're caring for the dying. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I am the Reverend Wakil David Matthews. Today, we are honored to speak with Dr. Marianne Matzo, who tells us that she has always wanted to work with the elderly and spent her life really in nursing schools. She noticed that often nurses seem to be a little more present for patients than the docs who are kind of trying to get things fixed, right? She went on and she achieved a doctorate in gerontology and became a licensed and registered nurse practitioner and wrote one of the foremost books about palliative care in nursing.
Hello, I am the Reverend Mother Ana Luisa Armendariz. Dr. Matzo is the host of the podcast Everyone Dies. And just to point out, every is spelled out and the number one and dies, which is a weekly podcast where she invites guests to come and discuss all aspects of dying, whether she is hosting a pet psychic or interviewing a death doula or speaking honestly and openly to someone who might be struggling to come to terms with their own mortality. She is the author of Everyone Dies, a children's book for both caregiver and children to help find the words to discuss death. Her website and podcast are inspiring and full of excellent resources. And Wakil and I hope we can continue to have conversations with her in the future.
Yeah.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah, we're right along the same journey here. Yeah, that website, I was just looking at it again, and I will highly recommend it. Of course, we'll put the links in the podcast notes. So be sure to check it out, check out her book, and really good to have you here.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Welcome. So we begin this conversation with the curiosity around what inspired you to begin this line of work.
I don't even know that I know.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in Lincoln Park, Michigan, which is a small suburb of Detroit, and went to Catholic school. My sister was a nun, and I was part of the Legion of Mary, which in the Catholic Church is for, young girls to do volunteer work within the community. And I was assigned this elder woman to go and visit. And I found that I just loved going to talk to her. And I don't think I was even in high school yet. And one of my best friends in the neighborhood was the elder lady who lived behind the fence from me. And we would, I'd go out and putter in my mother's, flower beds and talk with Mrs. Smith. And I always loved talking to her and listening to her volunteer work at the VA hospital and that kind of thing. So I don't know if I was born an old soul or if it was just these different experiences that I had growing up, but I really always appreciated and loved being with my grandparents and being with older adults. And as I got older, I mean, I always knew I wanted to be a nurse. And as I got older, it was like, well, I went to nursing school, and then I got my bachelor's, and then it was, well, what am I going to do for my master's degree?
Mm-hmm.
And I met with the guidance counselors, and they said, well, what do you like? And I said, well, I kind of like old people. And they said, well, there's going to be a lot of them. So that would be a great thing for you to do.
Yeah.
So I got my nurse practitioner in gerontology. And through that road and through talking with people, one of the things that I would always advocate for was within curricula, within teaching about gerontology, is that gerontology and death and dying always went hand in hand. In the curriculum, those were the last two things ever studied. And I would say lots of people die at all different ages. Why are we focusing this on just older adults?
Yeah.
And so I kind of, that my thinking became, got into that area. And I got my master's in gerontology. And one of our beginning research projects was a qualitative study where we had to talk with people about nursing homes and, and nursing home planning and nursing home long-term care insurance and how people are planning to pay for that. And this is back in, the mid 80s, early 80s. And I don't know that we're really any better about that, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But one of the people I interviewed said, there's a fate worse than death. And to her, a fate worse than death would be to go to a nursing home.
Yeah.
And that kind of got me thinking about, well, what are the fates that are worse than death? What are the things that people would say, I don't want this?
Yeah.
And, at that time, Kevorkian was doing his thing in Michigan. And so that kind of, reading about that and the people that he was helping and how he was helping them. And I started thinking about, as a gerontologist, how do we help people make plans or prepare for the end of life? Well, that wasn't happening. This is pre even advanced directives. So these things are happening as my brain is going to school and thinking about these things. And so when it came time to do my dissertation, I just had this moment of Kevorkian, and then there was all the talk about physician-assisted suicide. And I thought to myself, physicians aren't really assisting people's suicide. They're not even there when people are dying. And I thought, well, why aren't we talking about nurse-assisted suicide? Don't nurses do this?
Yeah.
But there was nothing in the literature at that time. This was probably maybe 1985. There was nothing in the literature. There were articles about what do nurses think about assisted death, but not do nurses assist death.
Yeah.
So I did the first study of nurses practice, if you will, or actions related to assisted dying.
Wow.
And I replicated a study that Zeke Emanuel had done he had done a study of New England oncologists and asked them, have you ever taken an action to intentionally end a patient's life? So not, did you give them pain medicine? Not, did you do anything else?
Right. Did you do any action? Yeah.
Did you specifically do something to end this person's life? And I said, we need to ask nurses that. So I contacted Zeke, who was in Boston, and I said, can I replicate your study with New England oncology nurses? Get your data and compare it to the physicians. So he said, yeah. So I did that. And it got an incredible return rate, a 73% return rate on a mail-in survey, which is
that's
unheard
remarkable.
of.
You're right.
And it just said nurses have been waiting for someone to ask.
Yeah.
And what we found was that 4.5% of the nurses in the study admitted to taking a specific action to end a person's life.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was 3 times more than what the physicians reported. And we have to assume that if 4.5% of the population admitted to it, it's probably more than that.
Double.
Yeah, right.
Because it's certainly not less than that.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was designed so that it was completely anonymous. I mean, we protected their privacy with double mailings and all this stuff.
Yeah.
They were protected. I didn't know who anybody was, and there'd be no way for me to know who anybody was. And so it was fascinating that, because it's the nurse who is there at the bedside. It's the nurse who the patient gets attached to. It's the nurse that the patient's going to say, can you end this for me?
Can you help me? Yeah. So true. Yeah, I've noticed that in, I've been doing care for my wife for 2.5 years now or so as she goes through palliative care. And the nurses are who shows up. And the best of them are the ones who show up and spend time actually sitting with you and just talking, and that's even rare now because everybody's in a hurry, But we had a nurse come in and sit with us most of the nurses nowadays are like my kids' age, right? They're all very young. But this woman was more closer to my age, and she came in and she spent a long time with us, and she knew the chart up and down. She talked about all sorts of things that nobody, she had taken the time. It was really impressive. She had taken the time to really learn about my wife and about everything we've been through. And we were so impressed by that. And we talked to the chaplain and the next time we were there and asked her about that. And she said, oh yeah, she's the best. And she said, in fact, she's here. And she came and she went out and told her that we were liking what she did. And she came back in again, spent more time with us. So that's a rare thing, as you are, I'm sure, well aware. I'd like to hear more. I'd love to hear more about the nonprofit and the work that you've been doing. And the book too. So it's every one, number one dies. Yeah, how's that?
Well, that's our website is Everyone Dies because somebody had the one with the ones spelled out.
Okay.
So, but we're called Everyone Dies, all spelled out. But the website is EVERY, the number one dies.org.
Yeah.
So I retired at, 62 when I retired. But up until that point, I had been thinking about, what am I going to do when I retire? Because I started working when I was 15, and I worked full-time my whole life. So as much as I wanted to not work, I couldn't imagine myself not working.
Yeah.
And so as I was doing probably the last 10 years of my work, I started a supportive care, palliative care clinic at our cancer center. And I was working 4 days a week in oncology at the VA medical center. And so I was seeing patients in clinic, and the questions that they would ask, and they would say, I don't understand that. And I'd say, well, let me explain it to you.
Sure.
And I'd explain it to them, and the comments I would get would be like, nobody's ever explained that to me that way before.
Right.
And I thought, well, I don't know, maybe they did. But what I know about people is that sometimes you need to hear it a few times before it kind of really gets in. And sometimes you need to hear it from a couple different people before you really begin to understand it.
Yeah.
And so I thought, like you were just saying, with hospice, the nurses don't have time. And when I worked in hospice in the late 1990s, early 2000s, reimbursement was very different. We could spend as much time as we needed to spend with people.
Yeah.
That is not the case anymore.
No.
And
sadly.
Many hospices are now for profit, which makes how much time is spent even more about the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I know, even in clinic, patients are booked 15 minutes apart.
Right.
And that is supposed to include you're looking over the record, see what's been going on, meeting with the patient, doing any teaching you're supposed to, and then somehow charting. I mean,
Right.
none of that happens in 15 minutes.
Right.
If you're seeing 4 people an hour. So I understand people's frustration
Sure.
with, they don't spend enough time with me. They don't talk with me. And, I'll tell you, we wish we could.
Yeah.
And often we do, and then we're there very late at night charting.
Right.
So,
Right.
and nobody's paying us for that, let me tell you. So
Right.
I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a resource where people
Mhm.
could get the information and they could listen to it as much as they want? And then if, and we're a very mobile society. So, if you've got kids or family members in other parts of the world or other parts of the country,
Yeah.
they should be able to hear the same information that the nurse has given them. But how do you make that happen?
Mhm.
So we decided to start this nonprofit called Everyone Dies to give people that opportunity to learn about all these aspects of serious illness, dying. How do you die? How do you plan for your death? How do you grieve?
Mhm.
And is any of the things that you're feeling when you're grieving normal? Which is yes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you're grieving, you feel like you're a little bit insane because all these different feelings are coming up. And
Sure.
so we thought, wouldn't that be like a great resource?
Yeah.
And so we started Everyone Dies and started with the podcast. And so we've been doing that. We're in our 7th season now. So there's probably about 320 or so podcasts on 320 different topics.
Yeah.
And I'm still not out of topics because
Right.
there's really a lot to go on, in these areas. And
Mhm.
so that's the resource that we offer. And we don't charge for it. It's there free for people to use. We have people all over the world who download the podcasts,
Mhm.
and some people do use it exactly as we thought. We got a letter from somebody who said his 100-year-old mom was at the end of life. There was a brother out in California, a brother in Michigan, and I don't know, a sister someplace. And they had decisions to make, but
Yeah.
not everybody could be there when the nurse was there to say, all right, let me talk to you about, food and fluids at the end of life.
Mhm.
So the one out in California had to depend either on getting accurate information from their brother and sister, or I don't know, going on the internet or whatever, however they did it.
Mhm.
But he knew about this resource, so he said to his brother, go and listen to this. We're all going to listen to this. So they could
Great.
all be on the same page with the same
Yeah.
information in terms of making decisions
Mhm.
with their 100-year-old mom.
Wow.
And I thought that was great. That's what we wanted it
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
able to do.
Yeah. And I
What an
love
incredible family too, like, that
Yeah,
they all
right.
said yes to doing that little homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great resource. I really love the resources page that you have that is laid out by subject and has all, different podcasts that you have done on that subject. It's caregivers, living well, symptom management, grief. I'm just looking at it, disease education, aid in dying, end of life, palliative care. I think we're probably going to steal that idea from you. Because it's beautiful. It's really well done. And so thank you
you.
for all of that. Appreciate that a lot.
And that's our producer, Sandy Troop, who
Oh, okay.
does all of that. She's
That's the other
incredible.
part. We love having
Mhm.
helpers. We wish we could afford more helpers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to your origin story too, because I was thinking back to the Dr. Kevorkian times too, and
Mhm.
how I've been called Dr. Kevorkian, like, from random people. I'm like, I don't think so. I think that is because there's first of all, it feels like it's a fearful thing that people imagine Dr. Kevorkian was doing. And
Mhm.
anything around death and dying is immediately kind of cast into that, like, that's scary, it's weird. But you know what else was going on during that time was Terry Schiavo. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering if
No, Terry Schiavo was
90s through 2000 something.
Did you look?
I looked it up.
I'm thinking in my head it was a little bit later than
Kevorkian. It was, but it was 1990 was when she got placed in the hospital. But I was really, as you were going through and talking about the nursing situation, like how many nurses also engage with that family and that person, and what were their thoughts? And I always wonder, like, wouldn't that be interesting to talk to nurses as they're holding space for these folks that's in a litigious environment, about quality of life and all stuff. So anyways, I went online and I thought about that, because I feel like in my mind and my brain, these two are kind of like linked somehow. But anyhow, going back to our process here, what are the challenges that you find when you're working, when you're talking about death and dying?
On our podcast, do you mean?
Yeah.
Or life.
Or life, with your books, or any aspect. What's the toughest thing?
Well, I think one thing was when before I learned to lie a little bit, like I would travel, and so, your seatmate would say, what do you do? I said, oh, I'm a nurse.
Yeah.
And what kind of nursing do you do? I said, I work with people at the end of life. And then after it's happened a few times is when I started lying, is that, and then what inevitably, then you're going to love this story.
Yeah.
And then they would tell me generally how they killed their mother or killed their father, pulled the plug on their parent.
Okay.
Now, I suppose I could let that go, but I can't. And so there I am. It's like, okay. So then I have to say, did you really kill your parent? Or did you do what they asked you to do?
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what they said they wanted, but I had to make that decision. I said, well, you carried out the decision that they would have made for themselves if they were able to, but they weren't able to, and they trusted you to do it for them. I said, so it seems to me like you did a tremendous act of love, because it's not what you would have wanted, but you knew that that's what they wanted.
Exactly.
And so it's hard, you're traveling somewhere to,
unwind.
Right.
to go into that, but it needs to be said. I mean, I'm not the kind of person you could drop that on and then I'm going to
not get engaged.
Be quiet about it. Like, how can I? They think they're carrying around this guilt of I killed my mom.
Wow. Yeah.
Or my dad, and so after a few times of that, I would just say, oh, I'm a housewife. I'm a mom. And nobody really wants to engage and hear about your kids. So, that kind of ends things right there.
I love that.
And, so that's what's hard, is the misinformation. Like I talked to a friend of mine once about, she had a college-age daughter. And I said, oh, has she gotten the HPV vaccine? She said, no, she's never going to have sex. And I said, come on.
Man.
Wow.
If she hasn't already, she's never going to. And it's like, it's so hard for me to just not, because, at the cancer center, I saw so many HPV related cancers. And if kids are vaccinated before they're sexually active, we could wipe out cervical cancer. We could wipe out cervical cancer.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it's like things like that where, I just wish I was better at being quiet, but I'm not.
Marianne.
We are. Yeah.
I feel you, because
you're not quiet either.
You're our ilk. No. And I want to be quiet, but you just can't.
I do.
People love
I do
that
too.
stuff, right? You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking a minute ago, and we did in our thing we did this morning
Dispatch.
about, how important it is as people in this crazy, crazy world to be brave and courageous and kind and vulnerable enough to actually step into something like that and help, be of service by saying, maybe there's a different way to look at this, or maybe, so thank you for that. And I, I get it, as like Ana Luisa and have talked about, people don't invite us to dinner
Or dinner
parties.
Anywhere.
Yep.
Yeah. Or,
It's a thing.
I think you told me too, Annalise, about being on a plane and having a book on grief, or being in an airport. I've had that happen too, where somebody will
Yeah.
see the
Oh,
book I'm
you're
reading,
reading that.
yeah, yeah. And then they want to know what we do. And sometimes it's easier to just say, well, I'm a stockbroker, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, Annalise, didn't you talk about one time telling somebody and they literally turned around and walked away? When he's,
Yeah, I had this young man who pursued me. I walk in the mornings without my phone or anything, and for a while, he would see me walking, and he'd always ask for my number or take my number because he was very interested, and finally, one day, after, like, a year and a half, I saw him, on the street corner. I was like, "I'm gonna stop and just see who this person is because maybe I should be dating. Let's do this." And uh, he told me about what he does, and then he's like, "So what do you do?" And I thought about it because I'm like, I'm a chaplain, I do death midwifery, I'm a substitute teacher, I'm a mom. There's a whole slew of my grocery list of what I do. But I was like, I actually am working at a funeral home because I do that too. And he literally did this. He's like, "Ooh, oh, oh, ah," and he retreated. And I was like, "Oh man, I should have said that a year and a half ago."
Really?
saved a lot of trouble.
You got to remember that line.
That's the litmus.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man.
so true.
Oh, but I
Yeah.
like you, Marianne. I
Yeah,
talk
thank
about
Thank
other
you.
things, and you don't have to talk about death because we know.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
wondering, and we like to ask folks if there's anything that frightens you about your end of life at this point, after this many years and working in this world.
I think I think what would frighten me, or what frightens me, is that people won't pay attention to my advance directive,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or they won't pay attention to like I've done my advanced care planning. I've cleaned out my house. In fact, a couple weeks ago, my daughter texted me and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm cleaning out some junk so you won't have to when I die." She said, "Thanks, Mom."
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've done that, so it's not, hopefully won't be too hard on them.
Mhm.
But what if, like, they don't listen to me and they do extraordinary measures that
Yeah.
I don't want?
Yes. Yes.
So I've told them, I will haunt you to your death if you don't listen to me.
Love it.
There you go. That's
And I think maybe they're sufficiently frightened of me that they'll listen,
Yes.
because they'll think,
Yes.
if anybody could haunt us,
Yes.
it'll be her.
Oh my gosh, you really are my sister. That is so great. I love it. It's funny because last night I had my friend over and she's been my advanced care directive proxy. And I did mention to her, I was like, you know what? I have to update the list of people I don't want to be in the room with me when I'm dying.
Mhm.
Ex-husband, my parents, like I was like, you have to know this. I want to make sure you understand, like, wherever I'm at, they're not going to be allowed to come into the space. So that's what I worry about. Like, don't mess my vibe up. I'm dying happily.
They can just put some sage in your hand and you can just hold it.
As a shield. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, we have heard stories. We've heard horror stories, and I know of personally know of one with some of our relatives who their mother specifically said, "No, DNR. Don't resuscitate. I'm ready to go." But when she wasn't able to make her own decisions, they said, "No, we're not doing that. Keep her alive, keep her alive, keep her alive." And so she suffered for another 2 weeks in pain and dealing, and instead of being allowed to just die. And it was, and then the other scary statistic that kind of is indicative of that too is the one that's over 60% of siblings never talk to each other after their parent dies, because of the fact that, they haven't had this conversation, they haven't
squabble.
agreed. And then they end up having battles over what they wanted and what they didn't want. And of course, the money part, etc. But wow.
Right.
Yeah. So great point. Thank you for sharing that. And I think I share that fear. Most people who know about this stuff, I think maybe the number one fear that we have is that people will ignore what we've very obviously said about what we want to have happen. Yeah.
Also got to draw a little separate point because my sister who passed away, it's been like 6-7 years now. I can't believe it's been that long, but I was her health proxy, her voice, and she had always said, never, ever, ever will I have dialysis. And so when her only kidney was giving up, that was a choice, like comfort care or dialysis. And my parents showed up and the doctor asked me because I was on all the paperwork. And I said, it's comfort care. Like, this is it. And my parents were very angry. And my dad to this day resents that I killed his daughter, right? Like, it's like, you could have chosen differently. You could have forced her to have dialysis. And he even said, he's like, if she had made me that proxy, I would have not honored that. And I'm like, which is why she didn't choose you. Right? Like, and so, we can also do the right thing for the person and have the ramifications continue in the future, right? Like, it is a thing. So pick wisely.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an important part. And if you listen to the podcast about advanced directive or advanced care planning, I am always talking about, it's not like, ooh, this is my favorite daughter, so I'm going to choose her to be my durable power of attorney. I tell people all the time, don't pick your family. No, I'm serious, because the family has that relationship with you. And, like when my sister was dying, I just wanted to be her sister.
Yeah.
But I couldn't, because she had wanted me all throughout her cancer trajectory to help care for her. And so I couldn't just be her sister, because that's not what she wanted or needed at that point. And so asking your child to decide that you're not going to have dialysis is like, how do I do that to my mom? Because it's their feeling. But if you have a nurse friend or, somebody else who can say, and actually it helps for people to write it all out, where you can say, look, here's what they said.
Yeah.
They asked me to do this because they knew it would be hard for you. And so I'm going to do it not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And you can grieve the loss of whoever this is. And then that way, the person who's dying can say, all right, I picked the person who can do this hard work. It's not like, oh, I'm the favorite, so I get to pick. It's a very hard role to have if you're going to do it the way it's intended, which is the whole idea of substituted judgment, doing what this person would do if they could do it for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where the education part comes in. That's where our podcasts come in, to say, oh, I never really thought about it that way before.
Right.
Maybe it's not such a good idea that my mom is my durable power of attorney.
Right.
Yeah, because that's an awful thing to ask them to do.
And I am going to hold space for some of us who could do it, right? Like,
if you could,
I think because I was my sister's person and my family is not in a healthy space to be able to just, and they're Christians and they're like, they were waiting for something to happen or whatnot. But I believe that if my kids said that, like, Mom, would you be mine? I would be like, not a problem. Like, there's not a whole lot of other people around me. We talk about death ad nauseum in this family. And so everybody would actually have been told and been on the same page.
Right.
In my sister's case, she didn't have a really good relationship with my mother, and my father never wanted to have her die. And she trusted me because I had been there through years and years of all these hospital visits. And so, yeah, so it would have been great. You're right. I would have gotten to have a very different experience with her death as a sister. And yet I'm very honored that she trusted me. And I was like, this is what she wanted Neil Diamond playing while she was dying. And my parents actually walked in and turned it off. And I was like, nope, we're turning it back on. And so I am proud of myself for having followed all the things that we listed, right? So
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it's every family, but generally I would say, yeah, find somebody outside the family. And
When I do, we do a class as well. And when I do it, I kind of say the same thing, is think of somebody in your life that can do that, will be capable of doing this. And maybe it is somebody in your family, your family, but often it's not. And it needs to be somebody that is capable and knows what you want. And the other thing now, I'd be interested to ask you about this because it's come up over and over again in the podcast and in the classes. Many people just tell me they don't have anybody in their life like that. They live, without any connection to family, or they live in a rural area all by themselves, and we actually started a nonprofit just with the idea of somehow helping people find fiduciary or people that could do that work for them, and hopefully not at a huge expense. And part of the nonprofit mission is also to create, to get grant money to help people with the affordability part of it. Because, that's the other part. People will say, well, yeah, I know I could hire if I had a fiduciary or a lawyer or something, but I don't have any money for that, So I don't know. What have you run into that? And do you have any ideas and solutions for that?
I have run into that, and it's frustrating. I remember I had a lady in hospice who wasn't able, to make decisions for herself. And so I looked at her advance directive, called the person who was listed there, and this woman said, I didn't know that I was listed.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, did she ever talk with you about what she wanted? No, she was my neighbor, and I've since moved to Florida. I'm like, holy heck, what am I going to do now? It's like she literally had never had this. I'm sure at some point somebody said, well, you need to put somebody down. And she thought, oh, I'll put my neighbor down.
Yeah.
But then never talked to the neighbor.
Oof.
Never said, hey, if any of this ever happens, here's what I want.
Yeah.
We had a family friend who did the same thing, had put my father-in-law down as her durable power of attorney. And as it turned out, she got really sick right after his brother died. So he was like, I can't even think about this.
Right. Yeah.
And he said to me, well, you just make the decisions. I said, well, what does she want? He said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how am I supposed, So I just figured, I said, did she want resuscitation? Did she want any of this? He says, no, I don't think so. So we just went with that,
Yeah.
As on how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
But
no.
That's how it works sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. More
and
than it should. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've got a neighbor or a friend or the checkout girl in the grocery store who you talk to, well, no, or think about these people. Who do they have? They have, maybe somebody at the bank or their postal carrier or somebody. And you say, well, they've known me. They've delivered mail in my house for 20 years. Well, then talk to them and say, would you be willing to do this for me?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And then tell them what you want. Don't just,
yeah.
I know George's name. I'll just put George down here. And it's like, no, please don't do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, part of our suggestions are to have a death party once a year, and because you don't want to just put this up on the shelf and forget about it either, because it changes, right? So you keep it as a dynamic thing, and have everybody over that you expect to be involved with this, and make sure they're on the same page with you, and haven't changed their mind or move to Florida,
Right.
So that's so important. And thank you for really noting that, because I think we can't say that enough to our audience and to the people we work with. And I'm so
Right.
glad you're doing this work. It's the more people
Thank
we
you.
meet that are doing it, the better. So really great. So let's see, where are we?
The resourcing.
Yeah.
So on days that it's a lot of stuff that's going on, either personally or with the podcast and death and dying, how do you take care of yourself? How do you get back to resourcing and grounding yourself?
Well, I have a garden that I'm well known for. Any house I move into, the grass quickly disappears.
Amen. Amen to that. Yes.
And I put in a garden, and I also carry my plants from how, pack them up and move them. And so I get my hands in the dirt, and I make things grow and bloom and be beautiful. And that nurtures my soul tremendously.
Yeah.
And
wonderful.
So that's like my main thing. And it's been something I didn't even started as a kid. And it's just kind of weird for kids to do, but I did.
You were hanging out in your backyard in the garden and talking to your neighbor.
Right.
Yeah.
So now I'll sit, I'll be out in the garden and either sing show tunes or talk to the dogs or,
Definitely
but that's
my kind of person. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I do.
Singing show tunes. I love that. That's great.
I don't know if the neighbors appreciate it, but
oh well,
it makes me happy.
Yeah,
that's all that matters.
That's so good. So good. Well, this has been really great. We really appreciate you so much and the work you're doing.
Thank
and of course, as we said over and over again, you are our kind of people. Is there anything you wish we would have asked about that you'd like to share before we're done?
Well, if I can mention the children's book, you did ask about it, but I didn't answer you.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
One of my thoughts about why people are so afraid of death and dying is that it's under this cloak your whole life. And then somehow along the way, you're supposed to say, oh, okay, and now I'm supposed to start thinking about death. And I would like, if, somebody ever put me in charge of the world, I would like for us to normalize death.
That's right.
We talk about birth and that we talk about death, that that children know that there's, they've seen The Lion King. They know there's a circle of life in a cartoon, but that circle of life is true.
Yeah.
And that we're all born and we all die. And there's lots of stuff that happens in the middle, but those two things, everyone does. It's like, and poop. Everyone poops along the way. So, I've wanted, while I worked for a long time, I wanted to do something to help normalize that for children. And so, in retirement, I had this experience with my grandson where we were in Cancun and he found a crab leg and we're walking along the beach and we're looking at how the crab leg articulates and talking about it. And he said, where's the rest of it? And I said, well, I think if you lose a leg, you die. I don't know. And he said, oh, so you think he's dead? I said, well, yeah, because, there's only 3 reasons people die. You die because you're very, very old, very, very sick, or very, very hurt. And the crab was very, very hurt. So, yeah, I'm thinking maybe that's what happened. He's like, okay. And he was about 4. And our son comes back, from his jog or something. He's a huge Marine. And he says, and Jax shows him the crab leg. And Marcus says to him, oh, and did the rest of the crab go home to his mom? And Jack says, no, Daddy's dead.
Oh, that's great.
And I get this look, like,
oh yeah,
you've been talking to Marmar, huh? And so when I went home, I said, I think that's the book. And so I contact a friend of mine from kindergarten who's a wonderful writer. And so I said, here's the story. I mean, I wrote the story, but I'm not a writer. I'm an academic writer, but I'm not a children's book writer. And And so she helped take that and make it into a children's book.
Beautiful.
And so the book is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and we have a website for it. If you want an autographed copy, we have autographed copies.
Great.
And it's a simple book, probably I would say anybody from wherever you start reading to kids to maybe about 10, but even older kids would probably benefit from the message. And what we wanted to do is to give parents a language where they could talk to their kids about death. Because kids say,
get it, and they get it.
Why did the dog die? Why'd this bird die? Why did grandpa die?
Yeah, where'd they go?
And parents come up with very scary answers that are not accurate. Grandpa went to sleep. And, you say that to a kid of a certain age, they're not going to want to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or, grandpa went to heaven. Well, he went to heaven. Well, why would he want to go to heaven when he could be here with me?
Yeah, where is that?
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So the book does not get into religious aspects at all. That's, I think that's for parents to do. But what we as academics can do is say, here's a way you can talk to your child. And I always talk to my kids that way, about death.
Yeah.
And they'll still say they're pushing 30. They're real close to 30. And they'll still say, are they very, very sick? Because that's our language.
Yeah.
Very, very sick means they're dying or, they're, so, I'll say, oh, they're, no, or yes, they're very, very sick or they're very, very hurt. And the very, very is very, very important because, like the kids would say when they were younger, they'd say, well, Mom, aren't you old? Like, yes, but I'm not very, very old,
I love that. Yeah.
Or, like if you say, oh, I feel so sick. Are you very, very sick? No, just sick.
That's really lovely. I really like that.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you. Great language. Yeah, definitely folks definitely get a copy of the book or
pick up the book.
Look it up. I have a friend, one of the people we interviewed a while back, Pamela Bellier, who created, and this happens so often. So often we talk to people who have noticed a need and have then addressed that need, right? And this woman lost her son and her brother in like a very short time and was looking for resources for it and couldn't find any. And so she built these little libraries and called it the Grief Library. And she puts grief books in there that are labeled as different kinds of grief. And there's one nearby here. So, but that's, that I definitely just going to make sure we have a copy of that book and put it in there if we haven't already.
That'd be great.
She's got a great website too, where she puts all the different books and quotes from them. So, so definitely that needs to be there along with our resource.
Thank you.
Library that we've
do
created.
that.
Yeah. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Yes.
It's been a real pleasure. We really appreciate you and the work you're doing. And audience, please look her up, find all pay attention, watch your podcast, and subscribe and like and do all that stuff.
All that stuff, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Conversations about the end of life.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Charles Heaston, the composer of the original music you are listening to now.
And of course, thanks to you, our audience, and all of our amazing guests. Please come back next week for another great episode. Share this with your friends, family, and community. We hope you will subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack. Each guest's additional information will be found in the podcast notes. And of course, if you have a good end-of-life story to share, please reach out. We are always eager to hear from you.